Most of you have seen this page already. Most of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy from somewhere in your teaching education. And I want to address your point here now. If there are some classes where it's basically, you have to know this stuff. You have to know it. So I'm thinking of, let's say, an anatomy class, human anatomy, where you've got to know how the body's put together. You've got to know what's connected to what. You've got to know what's inside. Okay. Now, there are means of active learning that you can use to disseminate that information. But in the end, what they basically have to do is remember. Okay. They don't even need to understand. They simply need to remember that the ankle bone's connected to the shin bone's connected to the knee bone, so on and so forth. Okay, those kinds of things. And in some ways, the lecture is good at doing that. So the lecture does have its purpose in higher education. But to really do the kinds of things we're talking about here, we really, really, really need to have other means that we can use to supplant the lecture. Okay. I'm a huge believer in active learning. I love what it does, but I still use short lectures in my classes, very short lectures, to clarify points. And that's what I think the lecture is really useful for what I teach. I teach statistics and I teach research methods. Two very, very difficult classes for students to understand. And my opinion is the best way to learn statistics, the best way to learn research methods is to do them. Okay? And you can't do them if you're sitting in front of a lecturer. You've got to have that opportunity. So anyway, back to Bloom's taxonomy. And look at how many of these kinds of things we mentioned that are up here. So as we go through today's presentation, I want you to keep in mind that there is a hierarchy to the way students learn. And in some classes, this is where we want to focus. We want them to get basic facts, and we want them to understand those basic facts and how those facts connect to one another. But those are the low-level classes that you were talking about, the basic introductory class. Most of us want to have more fun. Okay? And this is where teaching becomes fun. When we really challenge our students to move up the hierarchy and begin with applying information to solve problems, as we were talking about earlier. Okay? But in order to really, truly solve problems, it's more than just applying, right? You also have to analyze that situation before you can understand how things truly work, and you can evaluate how the problem needs to be solved, and then you can create a solution to it. So, any questions about Bloom's taxonomy? You're all familiar with the basic components of it? Okay. I want to make a distinction here. These three aspects of Bloom's taxonomy are not considered to be higher order thinking. This is foundational thinking. So this is what we want to teach students to do in our basic classes. Now, we can use both lecture and active learning to do all this. As we move up that hierarchy and we get to these last three, analyzing, evaluating, creating, this is what Bloom considered to be critical thinking exercises. And this is what we really love. Because, we're weird. As academics, we're different. We were different as students. We really want to be able to understand how the world works. We want to take that information, apply it, analyze it, evaluate it, and create new solutions. Not every student is like that, as you well know. In fact, you take a look at that sea of students in each of your classes, and you see the majority of students don't want to think. Okay? They don't want to think. They simply want to be told what to do. That's why they want to know what's on the exam. Just tell me, please just tell me what's on the exam, and I'll just focus my studies on that. They don't want to be broadly educated, okay? But our mission is to get rid of that type of thinking and to get them to enjoy solving problems and learning to critical think. And the way you do that is through active learning techniques. Okay. Sir, you had a question.
What do you mean the basic class? First, what do you mean? Basic course or basic class? Or you mean undergraduate?
When I'm talking about remembering, understanding, and applying, and referring to them as foundational activities, these are the basic cognitive skills that students have to have mastered before they can truly analyze, evaluate, or create new information. In other words, if you can't remember, you can't do any of this, right? You can't do that. Now, it's possible to remember something, but not know what it means. Okay? So, you could teach me a word in Arabic. You could tell me what it means. I may remember that word tomorrow, but I may have forgotten what it means. So I can remember it, but I can't understand it. And the really interesting about language is so much language is contextual. What you say depends upon the situation you find yourself in. For example, in Spanish, there is a way to formally address another human being and a way to informally address. So if you know someone very well, you refer to them as tú, T-U. But if you don't know them very well, or you have a formal relationship with them, you use the word usted, U-S-T-E-D. So context is important. So I may remember the word tú and the word usted, but I may not recall how to apply that information in the situation. So I may offend someone by not being formal when I should be formal. Sir, you have a question?
Exactly. This is what I want to ask you about. How you can remember something, how can you remember something you not understand?
Okay, sometimes,
Maybe not clear.
but I don't think that, I mean, it's just like that. I can remember a word, but not know what it means. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So I could teach you the Spanish word for school, which is escuela.
But here we are talking about skills.
Right.
Skills, isn't it?
Right, remembering is a skill.
Yes.
So is understanding. So what I'm trying to say is, unless you can remember it, you can't understand it. Okay? You can't apply something unless you understand it. Okay? Because you may use it incorrectly.
Because you are talking about behavior. Behavior, remember this behavior skills.
Right. Right. But you may be able to remember something, but you may not know how to apply it.
Yes, yes.
Okay? So this is why...
That means you understand how to do it.
Right. Right. That's two separate things.
Yes.
Yeah. Good point. Thank you. Now, here's what's really interesting.
Yeah.
Many of us in our teaching, we have problems with student motivation. And part of the problem is with our students is our teaching. It's our fault. It's our job to see that students are engaged and excited about the material. And we do that through the way we teach. What we find is as we challenge our students more and more, and appropriately so, the tendency to motivate and engage our students goes up. So as we move from here to there, students become more engaged. The problem with our teaching is, many of us don't take the time to move this beyond this, even in advanced classes, because we're still lecturing. But once we move from here to here, through active learning, students become very engaged and very motivated. In my classes that are problem-based and project-based, my students can't wait to get to class. My classes are considered the two hardest classes in my curriculum. And yet I have students waiting to sign up for the class because they want to go through it. Because they realize that I'm going to challenge them and I'm going to make learning fun. Learning becomes fun when they no longer have to sit there and remember, memorize. So if we teach through the lecture and using only multiple choice questions, we've got a pretty boring class. We're not going to engage our students. So keep that in mind as you design your courses to promote student engagement. What I want to do now is I want to expand on this list that we created. So what I've done is a short review of the literature on critical thinking, and particularly on problem-based and project-based learning. Now, I just mentioned two words there that have the same abbreviation, PBL. Problem-based learning and project-based learning. We talked about this a few minutes ago. Let me offer you a distinction between the two. They're very similar. They're very similar. Problem-based learning is used in shorter periods of time. So I can come into class and give my students a particular problem to solve. I can create a scenario, and have them apply what they've learned in class to solve it. Okay. I've given them a problem, I've given them the skills to solve it, and now I'm going to ask them to solve it. Okay. Project-based learning, it takes place over a much longer period of time. Usually at least half a semester, usually 8 weeks. The idea is to finish this experience with a product. That is, students are going to create something. So you're going to give them a project. You might, if you're an engineer, you might give them, you might say, I want you to design a particular device that does this. Okay? So they have to figure out how to do that. A lot of problem-solving skills there. Huge number. So there's not necessarily going to be a product at the end of a problem-based learning situation, but there's going to be a solution.